Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour podcast with your host, Andrew Langer.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Lunch Hour with Federal Newswire. I'm your host, Andrew Langer. So glad I can join you and you can join me for this show today. Listen, if you are watching us on our YouTube channel, go and check us out on every major podcast platform. Wherever you are getting your podcast content, you can find the Federal Newswire's Lunch Hour podcast. And we now have an X account dedicated exclusively to the show. So please go and follow at Lunch Hour Pod. That's at Lunch Hour Pod on X or Twitter. We always love having on repeat guests. He joined us a while ago. It's been far too long. His name is Rick Santorum. He was a candidate for Republican nomination for president in 2012 and 2016, winning the 2012 Iowa caucuses, 10 additional states, and nearly 4 million votes. Prior to his campaign for president, Rick served 2 terms in both the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, where he gained a reputation as one of the nation's leading government reformers, pro-life advocates, and national security experts. He is currently a CNN senior political contributor. He is the author of...
Not
anymore. All right. Well, there you go.
I work at Newsmax.
There you. Oh, well, yes. Currently a Newsmax.
There you go.
I'm sorry, Rick. I'm operating off of your bio here. We love.
Yeah, it's a little old, so that's okay. No problem.
Newsmax. He is the author of the 2005 New York Times bestseller, It Takes a Family, American Patriots Answering the Call to Freedom, and Blue-Collar Conservatives, Recommitting to an America That Works. Rick and his wife, Karen, are also the co-authors of Bella's Gift, that chronicles the inspiring story of life with the Santorum special needs youngest child, Bella. Bella was born with a condition called trisomy 1. I'm sorry, is that trisomy 1B? Trisomy 18. And she wasn't expected to survive her first birthday, beating all the odds.
And she's now 17.
Bella turned 17 this past May, and is a joyful and loving girl. Listen, Senator Santorum, thank you so very much for joining us today. And let's start with this, because there's a lot of discussion, right and left, about government policies that are pro-family. And let's start here with outlining there are some stark contrasts between the left and the right. And frankly, I think between average everyday Americans and the progressive elite on what pro-family policies are. Let's talk about it from your perspective.
Well, I actually wrote a book about it. You mentioned in the list of books that I wrote a book back in 2004. It was actually in response to Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village. And I wrote It Takes a Family.
Right.
And I did so because her thesis, and It Takes a Village, was that it's really the village, and in her mind, the village is the government, and the state is job to raise a child, and that the whole thesis behind the left is to atomize the society to the individual level, and that is an easier way for the government to control things. If you're in this alone, if you don't have a husband or a wife and a family structure to support you, then you're going to be much more reliant on other things outside of that basic fundamental building block of society. And I see it as, and I think historically we've always seen it as, the building block of a society is the family. That's right. That's the core element that, it's the first teacher, it's the first hospital, it's the first, a protector. I mean, if you go into all the things that a family is supposed to do for an individual, it should provide almost all the things that a child and even more generally a family needs to survive and to do well. And it's only when the family and that unit, that core, can't deal with the problems, whether it's a problem of severe health problems, or it's an external problem with crime or something like that, that you then go to somebody else. You go to a hospital, or you go to the police department, or you go to some other institution that can help you deal with the problems that you have in life. And that's the foundational structure that has made America great, that makes every civilization great. And the left believes, the progressives believe that structure gets in the way of utopia. It gets in the way of them being able to organize society in a way that everybody is this ward of the state that the state can direct to make sure that everything is run perfectly and done perfectly to the great designer's design. And so I wrote that book really in response to that, and said that we need to, instead of having policies that destroy the family, and you go back and look at welfare policy from the 1960s and just look at the deleterious effects on the poor and the destruction of the nuclear family. And so, again, this brings me to the point you're talking about. The nuclear family is sort of the key, is a husband and wife, because every child deserves it, a mom and a dad, and a mom and a dad men and women provide unique roles in the family and have different temperaments and different strengths and weaknesses that support the healthy development of a child. And so we see the left, who has taken a completely different view of what the family is, and the family is anything, and it can be 1, 2, 3, who knows how many people, and it can be not a man and a woman, it can be anything else. Those are the kinds of, I would argue, destructive policies that have brought about what we see today, which is over 50% of kids in America being born out of wedlock, in some like in the African American community.
Let me interrupt here for a second, Rick. Let me interrupt here for a second, because it just, and I want to talk about schools and education in a second, because you talked about that quite a bit when I was getting my master's degree. But it seems to me that this is yet another example of the left trying to bend science to fit ideology and to deny objective reality, right? Because you're right. We look at study after study about the roles that parents play in terms of child development. And yet, what does the left want to do? They want to bend that science to fit it, right? They want to substitute it. They take a worst case scenario. Well, what if this person is doesn't have a mom and dad, and then so they take a worst case scenario instead of designing policy to support the best case scenario, right? That's what
to
we're
encourage the best, instead of saying, oh well, if things we need a triage, and triage becomes the norm, and that's destructive of and that's why. We're going to get to this in a minute. I support government policies that support and strengthen the nuclear family, and part of that is what we're going to discuss here shortly with the one big beautiful bill, and having to do with tax policy. But there's a lot more to it than just that. I want to lay the groundwork for that. But you raise I'm sorry, just sort of as a general point, and this is why I so appreciate you coming on, because you've been a senator. You've been a leader in both the Senate and the House. You've been in both houses. You've run for president, so you think the big thoughts. I'm also a father of 8 children and a grandfather to 10. So
I understand that, but I'm talking about this because I want to talk about the public policy aspects of it, and calling on your public policy expertise here. Because you said something that I think it crystallizes one of the problems that we're in right now, and sort of the general debates that we're having about budgetary policy and fiscal policy and all of that. Triage has become the new norm. Yeah. If that isn't an explanation for the problems with our budget right now, I don't know what is. I mean, I want to get your thoughts on this, because I'm seeing an op-ed here, unless, other folks may have already written it. But this idea, we have to, and there's so much else that goes on, right? Because it's not just the fiscal impacts of the crisis, but the sociological impacts of constantly keeping us in a crisis. Talk about this, the triage is the new norm, at a 30,000 foot level for a minute.
Yeah, everything in the left designs is to take care of the problems that they create.
Right. That's Marxist dialectic right there. Yeah,
it is. And they create the problem, and they have, through their policies and through their cultural norms of destroying the basic foundational building blocks of society.
Right.
And then they say, oh, well, we need a government program to fix it. When the government program, in part, was one of the reasons that solved it. I go back to FDR, and FDR, there was relief. Right. There was relief, but relief, was never I mean, for example, welfare
Right.
was never to go to single moms. I mean, that was never the case. I mean, we didn't want to provide relief, if you want support from the government for something that we didn't want to encourage, because it's the whole idea. If you want more of something, subsidize it. If you want
Right.
less of something, tax it. And so if you want more single moms, well, subsidize single motherhood.
Right.
I mean, if you want more healthcare, subsidize healthcare. And that's what we've done. We have the largest amount of healthcare in the country. We were talking about our both mutual interest in healthcare. Yeah. And it's a huge industry. Why? Because government supports it. Education. You want more education? Subsidize. We do. We're the most expensive educational system in the world. Why? Because the government subsidizes it. So you need to get out of the what seems to be the triage, which is, oh, we have this terrible situation, let's give the money. And instead of, well, how about supporting the good things, like supporting the nuclear family, supporting, people who want to care for children, and for example, one of the things we're going to talk about is the child care tax credit.
Right.
Support moms who want to stay home and help their children instead of shipping them to daycare, where the government or somebody outside of the nuclear family is going to provide for them. So, to me, this is just sort of common sense. Look at policy that is designed to get right. you what you want, not to treat the problems that come from subsidizing what you don't want.
Right. It's interesting because we talk about this on the issue of childcare, right? The left's response is to give everybody some kind of a voucher for childcare, which of course also it gives them, especially in places like Maryland, the permission to try to unionize all childcare workers to make childcare
and to dictate to your children what they should know and not know. Right? I mean, this is a way to indoctrinate your children, is to get them out of the house and get them in front of government workers who have the government's idea of what the value structure of those children should be.
And let me add to this, right? Because this is the other part, which is to remove any kind of social benefit. I'm trying to find the best way to word this. I mean, essentially the issue of private charity versus public relief, right? And the idea of there are things that private charitable institutions do in terms of being soul affirming and being empowering and teaching people the life skills that they need to move forward that government is patently uninterested to do, right? The goal of
and prohibited in many cases from doing, right?
I mean, talk about that and this issue of the difference between the two, because it is stark.
Yeah, I mean, first off, again, go back to what we were talking about before. At the initial thing is the family, and the family is there, and you want to support it, have it strong, so it can take care of most of the problems that we deal with within a family unit.
Right.
The second level is has been in America traditionally has been the church.
Right.
I mean, the church, which is the spiritual bond, which is a vitally important part of someone's life, and up until the last 50, 60 years was something the government nurtured and supported. I mean, you go back and read speeches from presidents up through the Second World War, and the reference to God and the inclusion of God and the importance of the person's spiritual formation and life was an integral part of the system. And the church was the place you went to, not the government. You went to the church for charitable help or for other types of support. It was that understanding that that people are not just physical beings, but they're spiritual beings. And if you look at the problems that confront America today, the lack of spirituality, the lack of faith, and the lack of belief in God is destroying the younger generation. Now, a majority of young people don't believe in God. I mean, there are serious problems associated with that. And again, has government had a role in it? Unfortunately, yes, they have.
Right.
But by interceding and saying, no, church, we don't need you anymore. We'll take care of this. We're going to provide
the church.
Great. Yeah. We're going to provide cradle to grave. We're the church. And for many people on the left, they are the church. I mean, that's who they give their money to. That's who they attend meetings and rallies for, right? Is their church.
These are articles of faith, the sacraments that they put on. I will tell you something. It was really interesting because my wife and I are both big fans of musical theater. My wife sort of forced me to sit and watch the Tonys the other night as we're recording this, folks. The Tonys were just on. And I will tell you, there was a very interesting moment. In a moment that was bereft of anything approaching sort of normalcy, Nicole Scherzinger, who's a singer and actress, won the Tony for Sunset Boulevard, the revival of Sunset Boulevard. And the very first thing she did when she got up there was offer up her thanks to God, and she made it really clear without whom, without him, no things are possible. Whatever it was a real blessing and a moment that I thought was just amazing at this event that was bereft of anything approaching faith. So let's turn our attention to all of this. So we've set this up. We've got, triage is the new norm. We're trying to tackle a lot of different issues. There were some very good things in the original Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I sat through meetings, and that sounds bad. I was able to participate in meetings during the first Trump term talking about child care credits and paid medical leave or paid family leave, because these are issues that are near and dear to my heart. Let's talk about what was good, 8 years ago, and what is trying to be saved now, and what's all in this so-called big beautiful bill. What are things of beauty in the big beautiful bill, Senator Santorum?
You think about it. I mean, it's a multi-trillion-dollar bill.
Yeah,
and look, there's some general things like lower taxes. Lower taxes are good for families, so that's right. But that's a good thing. But as far as things directly targeted at helping the family, which is, as we've talked about, under great pressure and duress right now. There are two provisions. One is the child tax credit, and the child tax credit is $2,000. It's being raised to $2,500 in this bill, which pretty much just keeps up with inflation from 2017, and it's targeted at low to moderate income folks, and in fact it's an incentive. There's actually a work incentive, because the more money you earn, the more tax credit you qualify for. If you don't make $2,500 a year, for example, you don't get a tax credit. So you have to actually work, and that's one of the things that I've been very, very strongly supportive of, is that yes, we need to support families, but we don't want to support families where we just basically throw money at mom and dad to stay home and do nothing. One of the things, and I'm sure you're familiar with Arthur Brooks, but I'm a great devotee of Arthur's, and one of the things that's very important is for the parents to model behavior that leads to success, and the value to the parents of going out and earning success and having that success and being able to show that to the children, that this is the way we survive, and this is the way we do things in our family. We provide for ourselves, and as you work your way up the ladder, and what the child tax credit is there is that, look, we'll help you at certain levels. The child tax credit phases out if you're higher income. Sure. But what it does is it says to mom and dad, look, you go out there and work, you go out there and help provide for your family, and we will give you a helping hand, and we'll encourage you along the way that the more you earn, the more tax credit you'll be eligible for. So it's work incentive, it's supporting the family, and it's targeted at those who are in most need of that support. So to me, it seems like sort of a no-brainer, but you do have some conservatives out there saying the federal government tax policy should not be used to support the family, and it should only be used to create growth, because growth is the most important thing for families. Well, it is. I agree with that, but there are folks, I always say, I didn't always say, John F. Kennedy said, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
That's true unless your boat has a hole in it. And we have a lot of families in America that have holes in their boats. And so we do have an obligation to try to at least help them through a structured program that creates an incentive for good behavior.
Right.
And so that's the difference between the left programs and what I would say are, constructive programs using the federal government to encourage good behavior. Instead of saying, we're going to give you a bunch of money if you have a kid out of wedlock and you don't have to work, that just says, don't get married, government's going to be your husband, government's going to be your provider, everything's going to be okay. And that to me is very, very destructive. So the bottom line is we've got we've got a program here that is structured to help families and structured to do so in a positive way. The second program is
hold on. Before we get to the second program, we'll get to that in a second. We weave a narrative here because I wanna go back to this issue of teaching kids and laying the groundwork for success.
Yes.
Because Adam Carolla talks about this and others. Adam Carolla, the podcaster, comedian, TV host, how TV has changed over the last 50 years, that if you were a kid staying home from school in the 70s and into the early 80s, and you're watching bad local TV, the commercials that would pop up were all for vocational tech. Learn how to drive a truck, learn how to become a welder. At the beginning of the computer age, learn how to become a computer technician or repair person. And somewhere along the lines, those ads switched and it became, do you have a structured settlement? Were you exposed to asbestos? Did you use baby powder? Did you do this? Did you drink diet soda? And
victim culture.
Yeah. Right. It teaches you how to be a victim, right, and make easy money. Thankfully, we seem to be turning around on this. I'm seeing more ads for vocational training. At least we're talking about it. But this is part of what you're talking about here. There are economic issues that are at work, and there are sociological issues at work. And if government policies caused a sociological collapse, then it's not just as simple as getting rid of the bad government policies. To do it, in order to sort of return to the center, you're going to have to enact positive policies to do it. Right. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's about having policies that drive people to do things that are beneficial for them to do, and clearly marriage is an important part of that. And we have some policy, we've had some policies in the federal government that have encouraged marriage, but the bottom line is almost all of the federal policies actually discourage marriage.
Right.
There's marriage penalties, there's all sorts of support if you are not married, and if you are married, that support goes away. And so you have the negative incentives, and then you just have the overall cultural incentives that basically say, you need a man like a fish needs legs. I mean, it's just, you have this culture within the popular culture. Men are considered idiots. Fathers,
the idiot father, simpleton,
the idiot fathers. I mean, it used to, when I was growing up as a kid, there was a show, Father Knows Best.
Yes.
And Leave It to Beaver. And the father was a wise person and someone you went to and for good counsel. You don't see that anymore.
No.
And it's all of these cultural factors you mentioned. I'm trying to think. Oh, the success thing that I was talking about earlier. There's this success sequence that I talked about a lot when I ran for president back in 2012, which is, if you get married before you have children, if you work, and if you graduate from high school, the chances that you ever will be in poverty is less than like 2%.
Yeah.
And so where is that message? Where is the government policy that supports doing all of those things? And where is the popular culture message that supports that? And it is back to our point, which is this whole triage idea, which is government policy is designed to take care of the problem instead of encouraging the good. And one of the encouraging the good is this policy that we have in the One Big Beautiful Bill for family leave.
There's exactly where I was going to go with this. Perfect segue into it.
And so we have moms who and dads who have children, and in most cases, unless you work for a big company, they do have parental leave, and some of those parental leave policies are very generous. So you work for the federal government, they're very generous. And why are they generous? Well, number one, because it's good to keep employees who you have valued employees, and a lot of these employees want and need time to take off to take care of a newborn or a newly adopted child to help. Why? Because if you look at all of the data, the most important time in a child's life, in a person's life, is those first few months
100%.
where they bond with mom. So they have that security and stability of bonding with mom and dad, and having the emotional formation that is necessary for them to be successful. And again, there's studies all over the place about the importance of these first few months of life. Yet in most businesses, you get 2 weeks off. Well, and then you have to go back to work, and there's really no support for moms and dads. And so what happens? The child is not bonding with the mom. They're in daycare, or they're with a relative, which again could be a good thing if the relative is a steady person. But most of the time, it's in some sort of structured daycare where they're seeing a variety of different people, and they're not getting that kind of nurturing and connection that is bonding that's very, very important. So what this program does is encourage smaller businesses, who are the ones that generally don't provide daycare, to get a tax credit for them to give some time off for moms and dads, so they can have this critical bonding time with their children.
So, and let's talk about this, because my background, I spent 6 years working for NFIB as their executive branch lobbyist. So dealing with the agencies that were trying to do this, but talk about how, small businesses are impacted, and talk about some of the arguments that conservatives and free market limited government organizations are using, and what they're getting wrong.
Well, first off, they a lot of times they look at medical leave, family leave as a mandate. Well, this is not a mandate. No one's, and it's really important to understand.
That's a very good point. Yeah,
we're not saying to small business you have to provide 6 weeks of paternity leave or whatever the case may be. What we're saying is that it's actually good for you, because you're going to get better employees, and you're going to have folks that are more likely to stay with you long term if you provide these types of benefits in a very competitive. We got 4% unemployment. We've had it for a long, long time. It's been very, very hard. I hear from business all the time how difficult it is to keep good employees.
Right.
Well, one of the way you keep good employees is to treat them well.
Of course.
One of the big events in any person's life is the birth of a child. And you feel, as you naturally should, the obligation to care for that child, and particularly make sure that they're nurtured and have a good foundation for life. And so the business, we were saying, again, encourage good behavior. So this is the government encouraging businesses to do the right thing. Doesn't make them do it, but encourages them to do the right thing. And so I think a lot of conservatives are saying, wow, what is the government involved in this? Because it's the long-term benefit to society of having stable children is a good thing. If we don't know that, you just look at, unfortunately, the situation where you have children being born to single parents, and in many cases, or parents who were focused on work and didn't spend time in the home, and you find a whole raft of sociological issues that come from those children that are devastating for society.
No, and that's just it. As I sort of sit here, you think about the great. I don't want to use the phrase "great leap forward" because that is Maoist, but I'm going to, in terms of the development of things like health insurance benefits, for employees, that was done. The businesses wanted to be competitive in the marketplace in an era in which, employees were growing increasingly scarce. They couldn't increase wages. They couldn't increase costs. This idea of offering up this, it's a quiver, it's an arrow in the quiver to make businesses more competitive, and do so in a way that isn't giving out grant monies to people, which again, because all of this stuff comes back to, I think about, what we've been talking about in terms of the left, and sociological impacts. What they want is the ability to control vast sums of money to keep kids on this treadmill, the cradle to grave sort of government, caretaking. But it's an arrow in the quiver, isn't it?
It is. And it's an important arrow that it's not a government program, that it's not something that's run by the state. It's not something where you're taking your children out and saying, "Oh, we're gonna give you, wonderful childcare, high-end childcare, unionized childcare, so you can go back to work and you can just drop your kid off here." That's not what this is about. This is about providing them the support to be able to provide to care for their children themselves, which is, again, not just beneficial to the child, but it's beneficial to the mom and dad. It creates that very strong family bond, and it's very fulfilling for parents to feel like you're caring for your children and you're taking the time. I mean, I know that's not something we talk about a lot, but as someone who has, like I said, had 8 children, and now we have 10 grandchildren.
Wow.
The oldest is 3. So we have a bunch of toddlers running around here, and they all live within 15 minutes of us. And I'm getting a lot of nurturing, more nurturing than I ever had. But you know what? It's a wonderful thing to think about. You're pouring into the next generation. You're pouring into to these children and providing that emotional stability and support for them. Gosh, what a wonderful gift that you talk about. Yeah, you go out and work and you can leave your kids more money, or you can spend, or part of it, you can spend your time to actually give them things of yourself.
It's the only resource that you can't make more of. Time is a finite commodity, and you have to treasure those moments. In fact, before I let you go, because we've talked about your outside interests before, I want to ask you this: what's that moment like? As someone who is, my kids are growing up, but they're not in any position, thankfully, yet where they're gonna, at least I hope, fingers crossed, knock wood, having kids. But what's that moment like where you find out you're going to become a grandfather, and that first moment where you hold that grandchild in your arms? Talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Well, I look back at it. I mean, my father was an immigrant to this country. Yeah. And, when I was growing up, I mean, we were sort of taught, well, this is how our family does things. I mean,
right.
What does it mean to be, in my case, what does it mean to be a Santorum? And I think a lot of families don't really step back and think about, well, who, you have a mission statement as a business. I mean, most businesses have a mission statement. Here are our values. And a lot of families don't do that. I mean, say, well, what does it mean to be a member of this family?
Time out for a second, because literally that happened to me this past weekend. My sister-in-law was down. I live in Virginia. She and my brother live in Maryland. She had come down for a baseball tournament. And as they're driving home, the weather got really bad and she couldn't reach my brother. There was a tornado warning that came over her phone, and she called me concerned. She was in unfamiliar territory. She wanted my advice as to what to do. And I sort of sat down. I walked her through. I looked at the Doppler weather radar and said, here's what I think you ought to do. And she was thankful and I think a little bit embarrassed. And I'm like, no, she was like, apologized to me for calling. I'm like, no, you did absolutely the right thing. This is what family does.
Right.
The humble brag, obviously, I know but my point is, but I could not agree with you more. Setting out what it means. My daughter, my younger daughter, when she wrote her essay for college, had to invent a unit of measurement. And for her, it was the Langer. And we could get into what that means at a later time. But, I could not agree with you more on that. Please continue, as I rudely interrupted you.
I just say, you start thinking about, well, what are the things that you want to pass on to the next generation? I always tell young couples, who are, getting married or think about getting married, and they think, oh, we're going to wait to have children. I say, you know what? I said, you can wait. I mean, that's certainly what a lot of people do. I said, but remember this. I said, you're going to go out and you're going to work hard and you think you're going to build this and you're going to, create this and do all that stuff. I said, there's only one thing in this world you will do that lasts for eternity. That's it. Everything else you do, everything that I've done in my life, within 100 years, no one will remember me or anything I've done, and it will have had little to no importance on anything. Yeah. And there's only one thing that you will ever do in your life that is eternal, and that's to cooperate with God to create a human soul that will last forever. I said, think about all the things you say you have, that are important. I don't know if there's anything more important than that. And then shaping and forming that soul to be with God in eternity in heaven. That's the mission statement of the family, which is we're going to form our children, and we're going to form. We did, and we encourage, and thank God our children are on board. That we're going to form our children in a way that they know, love, and serve the Lord, and that's the beginning. Yeah. And then there are other things you can build on top of that about what sort of values that and one of the things we do every Sunday, every member of our family is invited to come over to the house for dinner.
That's
and
right.
Guess what? They all come.
Yeah,
and they all live within 15-20 minutes of us, and they all come, and they come not because we tell them to come, because
not out of obligation, but out of joy.
And they come throughout the week. Why? Because that type of of connectedness is really important, is that family support and integration. You talk about your sister calling you. I mean, the first place we call is not 911. We call, your brother, your sister, your sister-in-law. I mean, those are the things that are the value structures that we're trying to instill into our family. And again, the government shouldn't be trying to intercept that they should be in support of it, or punish it. We should have policies that support that type of family cohesion.
Absolutely. Well, Senator Santorum, how do folks find out more about the good work that you are doing?
Patriot Voices is the name of our organization.
That's right.
So you can go to patriotvoices.com or ricksantorum.com, and you'll learn all the things that we're up to.
Well, thank you, Senator Santorum. Patriotvoices.com is the website. So very much appreciate you joining us today. This has been yet another episode of the Lunch Hour with Federal Newswire. As I've said, please go check us out on our YouTube channel or our any of the major podcast platforms. You can find us there. And our new X account at Lunch Hour Pod on X. I'm your host, Andrew Langer. Please enjoy the rest of your lunch.
This has been the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour podcast, hosted by Andrew Langer. Check out the Federal Newswire's family of websites, as well as their social media stream.